Wonderful. We're so happy that you could all make it. For those of you who had the meal, thank you for coming. Our youth, thank you so much. The donations for the meal will go to our Interfaith youth trip to the Cheyenne Sioux Reservation and the Aware Club at the high school, which is a group of African American kids doing social justice work in our community. So isn't that awesome? I have a couple of, I'm Lisa Sparrow, I'm the pastor at the Guilford Community Church, which is the United Church of Christ. But this is an interfaith and secular event celebrating the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. This has been a rough year in the United States as far as race relations. Ferguson, Cleveland, New York City, and I hate to go on, have all raised up the issue that we still have a lot of work to do. So this is our reboot, recharge, we can do it night. And we hope that you will enjoy the music. We hope you'll enjoy some of the memories of his speeches and also take heart in some of the actions that some of the people are going to share with you that they are taking in our very community. I'm so happy to be here tonight. I wanted to just point out one thing, is that some of the bulletins were not folded correctly. So if you look at your insert, you want to make sure that the page that says all, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, is up, is on the front page. So just do a little double check. Thank you. The other thing is that at the very end of the service, we will be lighting candles. And for people who have toddlers, we hope we have enough glow sticks so that nobody's hair will catch on fire. We have somebody here whose hair caught on fire, Sanaya, when she was just a tiny little thing. So we try to take precautions. So if you have a toddler, we'd love to give you a glow stick if you have any more left. All right, so without further ado, welcome, and let's go.
If you look in your program, you'll see the words to the first song. I know some of you are singers out in our audience. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. It's written by Billy Taylor.
I wish I could say Thank you, choir.
Find our call to gathering on the first page of your bulletin at the bottom. And it begins with a quotation from one of my favorite prophets. Micah asked, "What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God?" I invite you into the responses. What are you doing for others? Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as quantitative change in our lives. Stand up for righteousness, stand up for truth, and God will be at our side forever. The time is always right to do what is right. Amen to that.
The next part of our service is an iterative process of readings of a narrator of significant events in the civil rights movement, along with words of Martin Luther King. And then we will be repeating some verse of We Shall Overcome. So I thought before we would start, it might be nice if Franz or someone would play, who's going to be playing the verses? While Franz is coming forward, I would love to introduce him. He's this extraordinary pianist, member of our community, And the Dummerston Church is lucky enough to have him as their organist. So he will be actually reading the first reading, and then he will be playing the We Shall Overcome, which is the verse. And so if you could have your program open, let's practice We Shall Overcome, just in case nobody knows it. But how about because it feels good? Complicated but extraordinary. I've invited different leaders of the community, African Americans and local leaders, to read some of these words. So it's going to be a series of readings, and they will come up one at a time. Franz is going to start it out, and then we'll sing. Jerome Holland will be next. So the people who are doing the readings know who they are, and they could make their way up to one of these two podiums ready for the next part. So, all right, so Franz, would you like to read your part just right from where you are? Would you like to come up above?
No, I'll read it from here.
He's coming in. All right, so he's going to start us out.
Martin Luther King Jr. could not buy a Coke or a hamburger at any of the downtown stores in the town he grew up in. He could not sit at a lunch counter. He could not drink water at the whites-only water fountains. He could not use the whites-only restrooms, and he could not ride on the whites-only elevators. If he went to a theater, he would have to enter from the colored entrance. If he rode a bus, he would have to sit in the back in the colored seats. And if he wanted to go swimming, golfing, or play tennis, he simply couldn't, because all of the pool's courses or courts had whites-only signs in front of them.
And so our story begins. If we could continue now with the first verse of We Shall Overcome, the same that we had done before.
From high school, he went on to Morehouse College in Atlanta, then Crozier Seminary in Pennsylvania. There he made straight A's and received a scholarship to go on to graduate school. He chose Boston University School of Theology, where he again made straight A's and received a PhD in theology. In Boston, he met a young woman named Coretta Christine Scott. And on June 18, 1953, they were married. Montgomery. 6 months later, in January of 1954, King was invited to come to Montgomery, Alabama, to interview for pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, what would become his first full-time pastorate. And on April 14th, he accepted the call to the church.
May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education ruled that racial segregation of public schools was unconstitutional.
And on December 1st, as he was making plans for a series of sermons on the coming of the Christ child at Christmas, a black seamstress in Montgomery named Rosa Parks, after a long day at work, refused to give up her seat to a white man on a bus. She had taken the first seat in the colored section of the back of the bus, but the bus filled up, and by law, whites could demand that any black person give up their seat at any time. And she had done so before, but today she was tired. She also thought to herself that the Supreme Court has just desegregated the public schools. So if desegregation is good enough for children, it is good enough for adults. So she refused to give up her seat. The bus driver called the police. The police came and arrested her, and the town exploded. Over 2,000 people rallied in front of a church that night to decide what they would do. The air was tense and explosive. It was a dangerous night for both blacks and whites. Reverend Martin Luther King stood up to speak to them that night, and here are some of the words that he said.
We are here this evening for serious business. We are here in a general sense because first and foremost, we are American citizens, and we are determined to acquire our citizenship to the fullest of its meaning. We are here also because our deep-seated belief that democracy, transformed from thin paper to thick actions, is the greatest form of government on earth. But in our protests, there will be no cross burning. No white person will be taken from his home by a hooded Negro mob and brutally murdered. There will be no threats and intimidation. We will be guided by the highest principles of law and order and the deepest principles of our Christian faith. Love must be our regulating ideal. If we fail to do this, our protest will end up as a meaningless drama on the stage of history, and its memory will be shrouded with the ugly garments of shame. In spite of the mistreatment that we have confronted, we must not become bitter and end up by hating our white brothers. Let no people pull us down so low that we make you hate them.
Let's continue to sing We'll Go Hand in Hand.
Someday, buses with carpools taking people to work. Non-violently, they brought the city to its knees.
After all of this and more, the Supreme Court declared that segregation of the public transportation facilities was unconstitutional.
King and his movement became internationally famous after that. Together with Ralph Abernathy and others, they founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and began organizing voter registration throughout the South. At that time, less than 10% of blacks in America were registered to vote, and in most cases in the South, they were not allowed to register. In 1960, 4 black college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, went into a whites-only department store and tried to sit down at a lunch counter and be served.
They were arrested, but they took it to court and a nationwide protest movement called sit-ins were born.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
The reputation of Martin Luther King and the movement grew larger and larger throughout the early 60s. There were more sit-ins, there were more boycotts, there were more protests, all slowly tearing down the most visible accesses of the walls of oppression and discrimination in America. Through it all, King began to increasingly see that the struggle was no longer just for civil rights, but that it had become a movement for human rights. For when one part of humanity is held down and repressed, then all of humanity is harmed and made less because of it. On April 3rd, 1963, the protest of Birmingham began with boycotts, lunch counter sit-ins, and daily marches, all done quietly and calmly, completely nonviolent. Bull Connor began arresting protesters, but hundreds more came. Over the weeks, the Birmingham jail had over 3,000 people in it, and yet more still came. King himself was one of those arrested early in the marches.
Ironically, he was taken to jail on April 13th, Good Friday, 100 years to the day from when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. King spent the next 10 days running the campaign from in the Birmingham jail.
While there, he had been given a newspaper in which a number of white clergy, Christians, and Jewish had written a public letter criticizing him for pushing integration too quickly. He sat down in his cell, and on pieces of newspapers, rags, toilet tissue, and backs of envelopes, he wrote a public response. His response became known as the letter from the Birmingham jail and has become one of the most famous statements about non-violent disobedience written in this century. And here it is, a portion of what he said.
My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in Birmingham jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. You are right when you note that we are outsiders coming into your community, but we have come to Birmingham because there is a terrible injustice here, and we must respond. Moreover, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds.
The turning point occurred on Sunday, May 5th, 1963. Then 3,000 children went on a prayer vigil to the Birmingham jail, where King and others were being held. When they arrived, the police threatened them and screamed at them, but all they did was kneel in prayer. Finally, one of those protesters stood up from his prayer and said to them, "We're not turning back. We haven't done anything wrong. All we want is our freedom. How do you feel doing these things?" Bull Connor yelled at his men to turn on the hoses, but nobody moved. The children continued praying. His men were silent. He yelled again, but they dropped their hoses. One of the firemen began crying. "We can't continue to do this," one of them said. The children continued silently praying. Nobody spoke again, and nobody got hurt. That event was the moral turning point of the struggle. Soon after that, the businesses of Birmingham agreed to integrate.
Let the trumpet sound. Let the trumpet sound. Let the trumpet sound today. Oh, deep in my heart, I believe. Let the trumpet sound today.
And now in call and response, something from the I Have a Dream speech. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal.
I have a dream that one day when I live in Georgia, the children of former slaves and children of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will someday live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but of their character.
I have a dream that one day in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers.
This will be a day when all God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside.
From the hilltops of New Hampshire, from the mighty mountains of New York, from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, from the slopes of California, and the Stone Mountain in Georgia, from every hill and molehill in Mississippi, let freedom ring.
When we let freedom ring from every village and hamlet, from every state and city, we will speed the day when God's children, black and white, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing, "Free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last." The truth shall make us free.
The truth shall make us free. Truth shall make us
over the next few years, the dream of King seemed to go bad. Protesters who promoted violence seemed to be on the rise, and people who promoted love and peace among all people seemed to be on the decline. Riots in Watts, Detroit, Newark, and others seemed to undermine all that he had worked for. More and more of the momentum of the early civil rights movement seemed to be slipping away. Increasingly during this time, King was growing to believe that race is only one of the issues which was at the core of America's problems. Its violent nature and general disregard for poor people seemed to him to be the larger issues which stood over race. So for the summer of 1968, he planned to hold the biggest march in Washington ever. This time, the march would not be specifically about Black people or civil rights, but also about poverty. He called it the Poor People's Campaign. This would be a chance, he thought, to reframe the movement in a much broader context and to regain its moral tone and direction that had seemed to be waning in recent years. The next day, April 4th, 1968, King and Abernathy and several others spent most of the day in their room at the Lorraine Motel planning for the big event of the next few days. At 6:05 p.m. that evening, Martin Luther King, Andrew Young, Jesse Jackson, and several others were standing on the second floor balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, waiting to go to dinner. At 6:09, they heard the sound of a shot ringing out, the sound of a .30 caliber high-powered rifle. King slammed backwards against the wall of the balcony, then fell forward onto the balcony floor. Ralph Abernathy rushed out to him. Martin Luther King looked at him very awake and very alert, and with his eyes, he seemed to be speaking very clearly. He was saying, "Ralph, it isn't over. It's only in other people's hands. It's only in other people's hands now. Don't give up. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up." And then he died.
18 years later, the President of the United States said these words: "Let all Americans continue to carry forward the banner that fell from Dr. King's hands. Today, all over America, libraries, hospitals, parks, and thoroughfares proudly bear his name. His likeness appears on more than 100 postage stamps issued by dozens of nations around the globe. Today, we honor him with speeches and monuments, but let us do more. Let us all Americans of every race and creed and color work together to build in this blessed land a shining city of justice and harmony. This is the monument Dr. King would have wanted most of all." So let's sing one more verse of "We Shall Overcome." Let's go back to the original one, "We Shall Overcome," please. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Now it is with great pride that I introduce to you our Chief of Police, Mike Fitzgerald, and Curtis, who you've already heard read, but who is the Executive Director of Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity. And they're going to be speaking briefly about some of the initiatives, the milestones achieved in our community this year at the very same time that some of these atrocities have been happening across the United States.
Good evening. We are having this celebration today in the backdrop of corrosive tension across the United States between law enforcement and community residents. I want to talk a little bit about how Vermont is advancing the cause of peace. And we at Vermont Partnership believe that Vermont should be the epicenter of diversity, thought, and practice in the United States. And that we work so that institutions can have the institutions may have the skills, practical skills around inclusion and equity to further the cause of peace. Vermont Partnership works with law enforcement across the state police, sheriff's departments, local police departments. And one of the challenges law enforcement has is one of telling its story. Telling the story, particularly in Vermont, of the good work that it does. That there's a small percentage of officers who are bad apples, but 98%, 99% are doing good, solid work. For example, state police has been working for almost a decade now in trying to eradicate racial profiling. They have a long way to go, but they have advanced in terms of having an early warning system internally within state police to track and to identify cases where bias might be at play. Every year, every new recruit, every new trooper receives a day's worth of training around bias-free policing, command structure from the colonel on down. Professional development is part around bias-free and around racial profiling is an ongoing effort on their part. They're working with intention, they're working strategically, but it's work that gets very little press because we know what sells in the newspaper. There are also initiatives within local police departments. Burlington, for example, has a program called Knock and Talk, where last year they knocked on 2,500 doors with a uniformed officer and a social worker just to talk to community residents. You know, how are things going? What's happening in your life right now? Do you need any services? Again, front-loading good community relations as opposed to waiting for a critical incident to happen. Rutland has figured out a way it's actually a national model now, as it looks at how to displace the opiate market in their town in terms of returning their neighborhoods to law-abiding citizens, where they do things like they cart in a bunch of flowers and they plant flowers with neighbors. You know, they ask the neighbors to come out and plant flowers together. So there's a lot of work that's going on. It doesn't negate the fact that there are, in fact, incidents happening, but at the same time, Vermont is one of the few places that is being proactive in the fight against profiling, in the emphasis on community engagement, on the focus on public safety over that of simply pure enforcement of the law. I'm very proud of the work that Mike is doing here as the new chief, and I'll let him speak to that. But you know, relative to what's happening statewide, Brattleboro is moving in consort with other police departments and law enforcement to really make Vermont a safe and welcoming place for all its residents.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak tonight on how I plan on leading the Brattleboro Police Department and its relations with the community. Law enforcement and communities across this nation have been impacted by recent events. No one will be immune, not the large cities or the smallest of towns. What message is coming from these events? At the very least, it should serve as a catalyst that we need some candid conversation concerning the relationship between police and members of the community. The IACP held a summit on October 23rd in Orlando, Florida to discuss community relations. Among the 40 representatives were police chief, national leaders in community and faith-based organizations, researchers, representatives from the LCAU, NAACP, and Noble. I would like to share with you some of their findings and recommendations, but I'm also pleased to report that your police department has taken action on these recommendations prior to the release. Communities today are complex. They are made up of men, women, and children of all races, religions, sexual preferences, income and educational levels, individuals with mental illness, homeless, and people suffering from addiction. How are we as law enforcement going to meet the needs of such a diverse group in a way that's all-inclusive? There are three components to a strong community police relations. They are communication, partnership, and trust. A community that is engaged and feels heard by its police department is more likely to be supportive of its police department. Frank and open communication is critical. Open communication tells the community there is nothing to hide. We need to educate the community about police practices and our daily work. There are vastly more positive stories than negative ones concerning police work. The media does a fine job on capturing negative, sensational stories. We need to make sure we publicize the good work we do, including the ways we are working with the community, like this evening. Internal communication is also critical. The officers of the department need to understand my philosophy and how it relates to their building relationships within the community. Communications need to be consistent and honest, even if the truth is or perceives to be negative or places the department in a negative light. Hand in hand with communication is transparency. The community should be educated in our policies and have access to our data and information that is not covered by legal restrictions. We as a department need to review and redefine our role, responsibilities, and priorities. We need to be aware of our strengths and weaknesses. We cannot measure success by the number of arrests or traffic stops. The department will define success and accomplishment primarily by outcomes and the satisfaction of the consumer of our services, the citizens of Brattleboro, rather than by strictly internal measures of the amount of work completed. We need to increase the emphasis on outcomes. We must understand unconscious bias and the potential impact it has on the department personnel, as well as community members. In a statement by the summit, it states, social psychologists have shown that implicit bias can impact what people perceive and do. It works below a conscientious level and manifests even in people who consciously hold non-prejudicial attitudes. In policing, this means that even well-intentioned officers may make decisions impacted by fears, feelings, perceptions, and stereotypes that exist outside conscious awareness. For members of the community, it also means they may act towards police officers based on those same factors. We can mitigate the impact of implicit bias through attention to the issues in recruitment, training, policies, leadership, and dialogue. We must constantly review our relationship with the community, regularly renew our commitment to just and fair policing, and promote cultures of trust. Becoming complacent will erode all the hard work that has been accomplished. To truly achieve an all-inclusive community and appreciation for diversity will happen only when there is trust. This is not an undertaking for the police alone. It's going to take efforts of all the stakeholders within the community to collaborate together. Success happens when opportunity meets hard work. Opportunity is knocking. Let's get to work. Thank you. I just like to add
to Mike's remarks that, we talk about there's a right way, a wrong way, and a Vermont way of doing things, okay? And the Vermont way of doing things is you have a disagreement with your neighbor, you have a disagreement with someone in the municipal office, and you go and you sit down and you talk to them. And that conversation is not an exclusive conversation. Any and all community members, if we're building strong communities, should be part of that conversation. The other two quick things is that I just read not long ago, actually this morning, that Vermont was designated as the safest state in the nation in which to live. That we talked about, and that's in part because we live, I think, on a human scale, where we do know our neighbors, and we are concerned about each other. And then the last thing is that the IACP plucked one of Vermont's own, Colonel Jim Baker, who was head of state police, and then in retirement headed up. That the IACP plucked one of Vermont's own to head up its community engagement strategy in Washington, so that the work that Vermont has advanced around community engagement will find its place in the national conversation. So we all have something to be proud of, being from Vermont, and the potential impact that we will have on the national conversation around corrosive tension between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. Thank you.
Time for the choir to come up. Here's a song that was collected at a mass meeting in Birmingham, Alabama in the 1960s. 99 and a half won't do. Matter, no exception.
And everybody has a role, which is why we're doing what we're about to do next as people are sitting down. We'd love to have you actually talk to your neighbor, just like Curtis said. We're in Vermont. So if there's something that's exciting, something that you're worried about, both of those energies lead us to do things. So if you could just take a minute, turn to someone and mention something that's already happened tonight or that you hope might happen in the next year. This is a conversation that needs to happen each and every day. We now have a couple more speakers to take us into our future. We're so proud of Curtis and Mike and all the work they've done together. And now Sheila and Ellen Schwartz are going to be talking about things they're working on in the year ahead. So hopefully a year from now, they'll be just as proud of what they've accomplished.
Okay, so Lisa asked me to make it short. So anybody who knows me knows I don't really talk shortly, so I'm going to try to make this really good. So I just want to preface this conversation with, many people know that I wear many hats within the community, and so I'm not going to go into depth over what all those hats are, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the Root Social Justice Center and the work we do there and how I'm included in that, and then Ellen's going to talk about the Vermont Worker Center and what we are doing currently there. So good evening, everyone. Good evening. I want to thank you for attending tonight to celebrate and honor the late Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a vision and a dream of hope, of faith, that one day we would all come together. One day we would all recognize our interconnectedness as people and as our causes. One day we would be enlightened to see that the fight against ending the fracking pipeline, the fight against racial or for racial equality and justice, the fight to end capitalism, the fight for healthcare as a human right, are all the same fight. The fight to live in a healthy world and to lead dignified lives is what we are all fighting for. I can tell you all the reasons why we should fight and stand up for justice, but rarely do we have the conversation of how to fight together. Rarely do we understand what and who is needed to accomplish this, needed to build a movement for change. Martin Luther King left us with tools. On behalf of the Root Social Justice Center, we want to thank the community for recognizing our space as a place that is working on racial and social justice concerns of all kinds and are bringing people and causes together to work for positive change. The Root Collective, which comprises of Mel Motel and Just Schools Project, Angela Burtfield and Act for Social Justice, Alex Fisher and Open Bookkeeping, and myself with the Vermont Worker Center, strives in our everyday work to be an agent for change and provide a safe space where the community can be safe in coming together to organize. We know the importance of relationships, and we understand that no individual or individual groups cause stand alone, that we too must all join in solidarity. We stand together, we fall together. We stand together, we fall together. I am fortunate to have a workspace that is open about who we are and affirming of others, and to be part of the Vermont Worker Center and the Put People in the Planet First movement. This movement encompasses the Work with Dignity campaign and the most notably recognized, the Healthcare is a Human Right campaign. Where I and many of us are standing on the side of justice and asking you to not only follow us, but to lead. We need you. You can make the difference. Now, before I wrote this, this morning I was in a staff meeting, and we chose to talk about some of MLK Day's quote. We talked about some of Martin Luther King's quotes in our staff meeting. And this is one of the quotes I'm going to read for you today that got brought up that we talked about. And it really brings relevance to what is happening today in our communities and statewide. For most of you who don't know, this part of the program has really moved me because we're talking about freedom. We're talking about sit-ins. We're talking about protests. We're talking about marches. We're talking about standing up for justice. And for those of you who don't know in the room, there have been many of us in many different capacities that are standing up for justice, not just for ourselves, but for all of you in this room. And we really encourage you to walk with us, to follow us, and to also lead us in that justice for all of our human rights. And to know that we don't do this just for ourselves, but that we do it for you. So I want to, thanks. So I want to read this quote, and it reminds me of the work that still needs to be done, but how I feel today. We have moved from the era of civil rights to the era of human rights, an era where we are called upon to raise certain basic questions about the whole society. We have been in a reform movement, but after Selma and the voting rights bill, we moved into a new era, which must be the era of a revolution. We must recognize that we can't solve our problem now until there is a radical redistribution of economic and political power. That means a revolution of values and other things. We must see now that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. You can't really get rid of one without getting rid of the others. The whole structure of American life must be changed. America is a hypocritical nation, and we must put our own house in order. Martin Luther King, Jr. In closing, I want to say that I personally thank those of you who have supported the movement, and to let each and every one of you, younger, older, able-bodied, not able-bodied, of color, not poor, rich, you all have a place in the movement. I stand before you as a revolutionary that will change the world. Thank you.
So my name is Ellen Schwartz. I live here in Brattleboro, and I'm a longtime member of the Vermont Workers Center that Sheila just mentioned, and also currently serving as the president of this statewide organization. For people who don't know what we are, we're a membership organization of people around Vermont who are affected by economic and social injustice. And we organize in our communities around issues of concern to poor and working Vermont residents. As Sheila mentioned, we're particularly known for our Healthcare as a Human Right campaign, which has been going on since 2008, but we do a lot of other organizing around issues of economic and social justice. Dr. Martin Luther King was outspoken about human rights and about how all of our rights are interconnected. And in a quote that was read earlier, which I'm just going to reread because I think it's worth hearing another time. This comes from his letter from a Birmingham jail. He said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny." In the Workers' Center, we believe that to shift the balance of power that leads to a denial of human rights, those of us who were affected by social and economic injustice need to get organized, and we need to stand up together for our rights, and that if we don't, no one else will do it for us. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. understood how race and class are used to divide poor and working people. In a lecture he gave in 1967 in Canada, he said, The dispossessed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro, live in a cruelly unjust society. They must organize a revolution against the injustice, not against the lives of persons who are their fellow citizens, but must organize a revolution against the structures through which the society is refusing to take means which have been called for and which are at hand to lift the load of poverty. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. Dr. King died. He was in Memphis to support striking sanitation workers. Those black workers were trying to unionize in order to claim their human right to job safety, decent wages, and dignified working conditions. At the same time, Dr. King was also a lead organizer of the Poor People's Campaign, which Curtis referred to earlier. This was a movement to unite poor people across lines of race, religion, and gender. He believed, as Sheila just said, that the U.S. had moved from an era of civil rights to an era of human rights, meaning that racism, economic exploitation at home, and foreign policy were inextricably linked because they all stem from the same system of political and economic power. And he believed that this system of oppression could only be challenged if poor people who had nothing to lose and certainly nothing to gain in a system that was stacked against them were to come together in unity. In the months before he was assassinated, he was working with other leaders on a massive occupation in Washington, D.C. And a month after he died, the first people arrived on the mall in Washington to begin the construction of what was called Resurrection City, which was an encampment of poor people, largely but not exclusively people of color from all around the country. Daily, residents of Resurrection City would walk over to the Capitol to meet with officials about their anti-poverty agenda. Resurrection City survived for over a month before the protesters were met with tear gas and arrests, and the city was razed. On January 8th, with 28 other people, I sat in at the State House because I felt the need to act in the strongest nonviolent way that I knew to let power holders in Vermont know that for everyone who is struggling without health care, now is the time for our elected officials to move forward. During the sit-in, Johnny Levitt, one of the protesters, read to us from Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. In this letter, Dr. King writes, "There is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension which is necessary for growth. I see, not Dr. King, I see this constructive tension today in Ferguson, I see it in Staten Island, and on the I-93 in Boston. I see it in the Black Lives Matter movement spreading around the country. I see it wherever people are confronting systemic racism in word and in action. I see it too in the climate justice movement. I see it in our healthcare movement, and in the many movements around Vermont and around the country that are tackling issues of white supremacy, workers' rights, criminal injustice, disability rights, LGBTQ rights, immigrant rights, mental health rights, and all violations of human rights. The Vermont Workers' Center stands in solidarity with all people who are challenging an economic and political structure that is destroying lives of people and threatening the very survival of our planet in favor of the profit motive. We need to stand up, we need to support each other, we need to build a movement for economic justice, for social justice, for climate justice, and for an end to white supremacy. This is the legacy of Dr. King, and it's a living legacy wherever and whenever we make it so. So I, like Sheila, encourage you to get involved in any way. The Workers' Center meets down at the Root Social Justice Center every other Tuesday night. We have a meeting tomorrow night from 6 to 8. And anybody is welcome to join us to find out more about what we're doing and to join in or to come and speak with any of us. And I know there's a lot of other organizations around this community that are also working on these issues, and I really encourage people to take action. Thank you.
We are so lucky to have these amazing people in our community. We now are privileged to have France play for us while we take a free will offering, half of which will go to the work of the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity, the other half to the Root Social Justice Center.
we close this celebration of the life, work, and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as we prepare to take this movement out, to make these commitments to peace and justice real in our community, let's offer this closing prayer together. Oh God, with heavy hearts we turn to you. Dreams deferred, lives taken, more futures robbed, more deaths that lead to injury, violence, and unrest, realizations of divisions and systems of injustice, more struggle, confrontation, and despair. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
This is a time where hands in the air not only mean surrender, but solidarity. As differences seek to rule the day, we search for another path, a new way to live in community.
Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Change our hearts and transform them from places that see otherness to ones that honor your image in each person. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Guide us to use our voices to name the racism and prejudice still thriving in our midst, striving for systems of accountability that maintain justice for all people.
Let
justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Strengthen us for the difficult but beautiful work of dismantling racism and building a community where all are welcomed and honored. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Stir our hearts, free our minds, guide us to follow your way. Help us to push aside our complacency, to make room for your Spirit, calling us forward from this place.
Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.
Make us instruments of your peace here, now, this year, right here where we live and work. And now I invite you to take your candles. There will be 4 individuals who will come forward with a light to symbolize the light that you are taking out into the world this night as we sing This Little Light of Mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. Where I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All through my town. All through my town, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. All through my town, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine. Through my town, I'm
never ends. Let's go out and do our work.
Amen.